Hello. Wasn't sure that people were here yet. I'm still getting used to the whole setup with trying to figure out how to tell that there are participants and such. So hello. Good to see you. Or see that you're here. Can you hear me okay? Great. Awesome. Well, we're still a bit early, so we'll wait a few more minutes before officially starting. How is the background noise? Is it very noisy? Or is it being filtered effectively? Let me know. If that's the case, then I can try to switch to a less sensitive mic. Okay, great. Alrighty. Yep. Hi everyone. I'm not going to say specific names just for the sake of privacy, but I see everyone and thank you for being here. So I guess since there's some people here already, we can get started. If you haven't been to one of these lives before, welcome. This is just an opportunity for Q&A and to ask questions about freedom beyond recovery, the living method, addiction to self, non-duality, anything that might be useful to explore and get feedback on. But before we jump into that, we start every meeting with a sense of being meditation. So it's real simple, nothing too complicated. I'm just going to set my timer for 5 minutes, and what we'll do for 5 minutes is just, sit and alertly notice the present sense of aliveness, this present sense of being here that is prior to thought. It does not require a thought to notice. It is always here. It has a spacious quality to it. It is non-conceptual in nature, and as I sometimes like to say, quoting Meister Eckhart, it is closer to us than we are to ourselves. So with that, just sit back, just notice this present sense of existence here now for a few minutes with me. All right, everyone, come on back. I'll put my phone on Do Not Disturb. And now we're in the Q&A portion of this YouTube Live. So I apologize if there's a lot of background noise. There's a lot of construction going on around my apartment. So that will just be a further way that this is celebrating itself. So all good. So if anyone would like to ask a question, I'll just speak to the question. I'll keep the name of the person anonymous. And we'll see what happens. Okay, so we have a question. I saw you wrote about shadow work recently. Can you talk a bit about how that fits in with non-duality, addiction, and recovery? Sure. So for those of you that don't know, I recently wrote a post on shadow work and how it fits in with the living method and non-duality. It's in 2 parts. I'll be releasing the second part sometime this week, perhaps tomorrow or the day after. And really, I guess the post initially just talked about, why there's some confusion and stickiness with this whole idea of shadow work, and why some teachers within non-duality and other traditions, orientations, may not be open to exploring or acknowledging it, which is understandable, but also not necessarily my view, whatever that means. So within this teaching, the living method, shadow work could be most appropriately framed as this process of looking closer at experience. In particular, the process of looking closer at identities, attachments, the beliefs, opinions, positions, assumptions that we have about ourself and experience. So sometimes that might look like looking closer at, this fundamental question of, what's experiencing? What is my actual experience of what I am, rather than what's the habit of belief? Is it really true that it feels like I'm a Boh or someone? The Bob, Carol, Mary, or is the experience of what I am different? So that can be one approach. Really, we're just looking closer at identity itself in the various ways that it pops up. Now, the shadow work aspect of it is that these identity structures, as they arise, can be very uncomfortable. The way that life brings the need to look closer into attention can be very disorienting and painful. Suffering is a very useful alarm clock, but it's still an alarm clock. So we may be encouraged to look at a pattern, a identity that we've just been conditioned into, in a way that may have a particular emotional flavor. Let's say, frustration or anger or fear, irritability, resentment, rejection, these kinds of things, fear of vulnerability. So it's not to say that I think the main thing that gets sticky in this context is that shadow work is often viewed as like fixing the person or healing the person, and that's not the view here. There's no person to heal or fix. What we are is already whole and complete, and so we look at these conditioned patterns, these identities based in the belief in separation from that view of, given that there's awakeness, given that there's only one thing going on, what's actually true? What is this experience really? What is this energy really? Is it really true that my livelihood depends on being in control? Is it really true that my well-being as awakeness, oneness, is contingent upon this appearance behaving a certain way, or whatever it is, right? If there's this controlling, managing dynamic, is it really true that my livelihood as awakeness is dependent on getting relief through a given substance or behavior, right? Seeing that this tendency to self-soothe and avoid, to try to control experience through this imaginary third party of identification as self, that that's a learned way of living as life that isn't actually doing us any favors, right? That's why we look into this stuff, that it brings up suffering. And so that's the invitation of, maybe this isn't the most authentic way of expressing, of living life as life. So when our attention gets caught up in these textures, these beliefs, these tendencies of selfing, right? When we're misidentified as the character that isn't there to begin with, this process of shadow work can involve looking closer at, what's actually true, and from like an identity level. Also, what is this really? Looking closer at what the actual experience that's being held on to or pushed away is, because a lot of what perpetuates that relationality and splitting into the subject object is based around the assumptions that we have, not only about what we are, but what this is. And so this process of looking closer using disintegrative inquiry, integrative inquiry, who is it that's experiencing? Is it really true that there's separation? Being two ways of approaching inquiry. That whole process of kind of untangling and giving love and compassion, meeting experience as what we are rather than what we're not, the clearing process involves this shadow work. But really it is an aspect of clearing. Shadow work is an aspect of clearing that is inherently impersonal. Just like, remembering the truth of what we are is also an impersonal and natural process. You could say that that's always what's happening in a way, but it's only within these, nice communities of spirituality where we are able to navigate that process through concepts in a way that is tangible. But that's always happening, no matter if we're in a YouTube live like this discussing these topics, or if we're going to the mail and dropping off a letter in the mail. It's the same. That experience, that appearance, is life exploring and remembering itself, playing with these ideas of being something in particular. So I think that's stopped. So I hope that answered an aspect of your question. Thank you. Second question is, how can I feel whole, one inside? So this is a beautiful example of how so many of the questions that come up, the answer is within them. So this question would fall into the category of an assumption. It's one way of looking at it. So if there's that idea of how do I feel whole? How do I feel one? How do I feel like oneness? I don't feel like oneness, so how do I feel like oneness? How do I get there? How does that change happen so that experience can be here? Because it's not here, right? So we start with, is it true that this isn't oneness? Is it true that your experience isn't wholeness already? Is it true that what you are isn't already, the felt experience of what you are isn't already one? So with that, we just look closer at what is it that's here? What is experience really? What is my experience really? If it feels like I'm not whole, we look at, what am I believing about myself? If I feel like I'm not whole, I'm believing that I'm a separate self. I'm believing that I'm the character. Because it's only from the lens of separation, that wholeness can be perceived as separation, as feeling fragmented. Wholeness is what we're experiencing no matter how this is appearing. Since there's only one thing going on, there's no room for anything other than oneness to be experienced. And what would be experiencing oneness? Oneness. So if it seems like a separate self is, used to experience oneness and now isn't experiencing oneness, we just look closer at what's actually evident in experience. Given that there's only oneness, can it be true that oneness fell out of itself, or oneness forgot itself? Non-duality isn't a experience that we attain somehow. It's a description about what is. It's a description about reality. So it's not that we have to do something or have a certain experience to finally experience non-duality. Non-duality is experience already. There's only non-duality. This is it. This is non-duality. This is oneness. This is onenessing onenessing about oneness. All these noises are oneness. This microphone is oneness. This computer and everything is oneness. The screen is oneness. Colors and shapes are oneness. There's only oneness. So this has to be oneness. So if it feels like it's not oneness, it can only feel that way when we're referencing thinking about our experience rather than the felt sense of our experience. So that would be my suggestion of the first kind of way of feeling into that. What am I believing myself to be? Okay. How can I heal with physical ailments with this work? How can we be free from identity blocks to physical healing? So, this teaching isn't about fixing reality. Non-duality is not, it doesn't have the agenda of making this different. What it does offer is the opportunity to recognize what's actually here and what's experiencing. And that can impact the experience of experiencing. But it doesn't mean that sickness goes away or doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that the body doesn't go through the processes that it goes through. That is honestly just an absurd idea. I mean, if that were true, all these teachers like Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, Fred Davis, there are plenty of teachers that have dealt with physical issues. And they're still, bright. There's still awakeness shining through them. But that doesn't mean that the body isn't going to experience the conditions that bodies experience. Bodies are bodies, but the body isn't what wakes up. The body can be nourished and helped, like the well-being of our felt experience can be improved through clarity and through this process. That's absolutely true. However, if we're looking to a teaching like this to, escape human experience, then it's the wrong camp to explore. It's not something that we can offer. But the good news is that it turns out we don't have to. We don't have to fix this. All we have to do is unlearn our ideas about ourselves and what this is, what we are. And in the absence of that lens, this is enough. All the problems that can be experienced are the imaginary character's problems. And so in the absence of an imaginary character, is there actually anything wrong with this? I don't think so. That's not the experience. This is as it is. Any argument with this, any rejection of this would be coming from thinking. And those are just thoughts. Thinking is just arising. That too is embraced by what is. So it's much more worth our while to put attention on how can we, so to speak, get on board with how reality is showing up, or at least address our propensity to be in argument with it, or to believe the arguments with it. That's much more worthwhile than trying to fix God's mistake. So that's all I have to say about that. Next question. Sometimes have labelless experiences, but still feels like it's from a center. Does that go? What inquiry might be helpful? So, in a similar vein to what I had just shared on, the inquiry that would be useful is it true that this needs to be different? There's this idea that, okay, well, if there's a sense of center, if there's a sense of someone, that's the mistake and that needs to go away. That needs to change. I can't recognize the truth of what I am until that is different. I can't recognize true nature and live as true nature until this experience changes or a certain experience is had. That's not true. What you are isn't an experience. So changing the change of experience would not impact what you are, because what you are isn't an experience. So if we're waiting for an experience to be different, we're dreaming. If we're hoping that an experience would be different, we're dreaming, and that's okay. That's what happens. There's nothing wrong with it. It's innocent. That's what we're used to. Used to doing, used to falling into. But the resolution isn't in what can I do to make this better. The resolution is in what is it about how I'm viewing this, or how I'm believing I'm viewing this, that's making this seem wanting. It's making this seem, dull and incomplete. What is it about where I'm believing I'm looking from that is influencing the view? Yeah, exactly. So if we're starting from the belief in lack, of course this will be lacking. And we don't need a belief to go away. We just need to not believe it. If there's a billboard, I'm driving down the highway and I see a billboard that says, "This sucks." I don't need I don't need the billboard to go away to not suffer from that appearance. I just don't have to agree with the billboard. It's the same here. A texture of lack, whatever that is, may arise. It doesn't need to be agreed with. It also doesn't mean it has to go away. What we are is already welcoming every way that this is arising, every way that we as this are appearing. And that's all this wants, so to speak. It wants to be loved as it is, rather than viewed from what ideas we have about it. Yeah, absolutely. Welcoming resistance too. If resistance is present, it's already been welcomed. So, you know, even the tendency of resisting resistance can be accepted, can be embraced. It's okay. It's okay if I don't, if it's difficult to accept this. It's okay for there to be resistance here. Is it really true that I need to resist resistance? That would be a question. And even more, re- resistance is also based in the idea of a self that knows what this is and therefore how it should be, as well as so resistance is based in knowledge. So either knowledge of the knower or knowledge of the known. And so the either by looking at the beliefs about the subject or beliefs about the object, it's the same, right? Seeing what are our assumptions there. If I'm agreeing with the resistance, then it's likely that I awakeness am believing that I'm a bow, and so it would be worthwhile to look closer there. And in seeing through the belief in a bow, recognizing that what I am isn't this separate self. In fact, there isn't a separate self, and that's a very good reason why I wouldn't be that, whatever I am. Um, that's one way of kind of loosening our grip on resistance. And another way would be looking at closer at, okay, so is it true that what's arising, is it really true that I know what that is? If there isn't a self that's experiencing, and all ideas about what's being experienced are based on this belief in a self, right? Every idea that we could have about life is always referring to this subject that it's in relation to. So, since we can't find that, is it true that the ideas about this are, they hold any water? So, this process is all about looking closer at our assumptions about this. We're not here to change anything. Change may happen, but if we are meeting this with an agenda in mind, it may be worthwhile to look closer at what we think we're going to get um, with that given outcome, and if maybe what we're looking for isn't already here. So, and it's okay. It's okay if we fall into that tendency. Mhm. Falling into the dream, forgetting is this too. Cloudiness is clarity appearing that way. Cloudiness is clarity and drag. So it's all this. There's no there's no escape. There's no room for there to be anything outside of oneness. So the more that sets in, the clearer this math of one is, and is kind of just the conviction builds, right? That even if I believe that I'm a self, I know that this has to be awakeness because there's only awakeness. So even if there's misidentification, it has to be true that this is really awakeness, given that there's only awakeness. So starting with this position of humility and honesty can really make a big difference in how this unknowing process goes. It's a lot easier for awakeness to recognize that it's believing a thought than it is for a separate self that's real to merge into oneness. That very well could take lifetimes. So that's that. I believe we have time for one more question if someone wants to ask something. But if not, we can end early. I know it takes time to type, so I'm not rushing off for that reason. All right, everyone. Well, it seems like our cup is full. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to those that have participated. And yeah, this is wonderful. So thank you. Some of you I'll see throughout the week. If that's the case, I look forward to it. And otherwise, see you guys later. Thank you so much. Bye now.